So you should be able to see it now, right? Can we see it?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to start off in two parts today. We'll take a break after man's perfection with the supreme, and then we'll finish off today with predestination and providence. So let me go into the study. So this is now man's perfection with the supreme. How are we related to the emerging personality and presence of the perfecting supreme being? And here's a quote, and I'm going to ask here, Heather, since you started us off on a centering prayer, would you, when I get to the actual Urantia book citations, would you read those, such as this one here from
Yeah.
11676?
Mhm. Man's perception with the perfection with the supreme, predestination and providence. Man's urge for paradise perfection, his striving for God attainment, creates a genuine divinity tension in the living cosmos, which can only be resolved by the evolution of an immortal soul. This is what happens in the experience of a single mortal creature. But when all creatures and all creators in the grand universe likewise strive for God attainment and divine perfection, there is built up a profound cosmic tension, which can only find resolution in the sublime synthesis of almighty power with the spirit person of the evolving God of all creatures, the Supreme Being.
And we talked about this already, the idea of power personality unification, the idea of personality and non-personality reality coming together in the supreme being, the non-personal level certainly on the almighty supreme nature, and then of course God the supreme on the spirit nature. This is a very good quote because it really does sum up what we've been studying for these 8 classes. Now let me go down and start the actual reading on this.
Oh, lexicons.
Okay. And I'm going to go back to you, Heather. This is another citation from the book. And if you kindly, let's see. Okay, so we just read this citation already. This is a repeat of what we just started with. So let me continue on. Now, this is another graphic. This is the evolutionary unification of man and supreme. And what we're looking here is the identity of the human personality and relating it in parallel to the identity of the supreme personality. Now, in our particular case, we are created in the image of God, and he reveals himself at the level of spirit, mind, and energy matter of creation. So our spirit, the thought adjuster, the inner light, the adjutant mind spirits of our mind, and then the human body in terms of matter. And we have within the evolution of time and space an experiential growth. And this creates a repercussion of the immortal soul of the human ascender. Now, this is the microscopic individuality of us in relationship to the Supreme. On the totality level, the identity of the Supreme Personality, the spirit nature of God the Supreme, has origin within the Paradise Trinity, spirit. Cosmic mind is the consciousness of the Supreme Being throughout the whole grand universe. And then finally, the grand universe itself is similar to the idea of the body, the human body of the Supreme Being. And as we are going through the experiential evolution in time and space, the Supreme Being is experiential evolution in time and space as well. But he's ending towards not the immortal soul of the human ascender, but the cosmic oversoul of the Supreme Being. So there is a relationship of the part and the whole. And I don't know if you can you read this, Heather? Is it readable to you, the mortal man?
Yes. Mortal man, being a creature, is not exactly like the Supreme Being, who is deity, but man's evolution does in some ways resemble the growth of the Supreme. Man consciously grows from the material toward the spiritual by the strength, power, and persistency of his own decisions. He also grows as his thought adjusters develops new techniques or reaching down from the spiritual to the Marancha soul, levels. And once the soul comes into being, it begins to grow in and of itself.
Yeah, so that's a really good foundation. And I like this relating the part to the whole, that we're not disconnected. We are very similar in terms of our together striving towards perfection. So the grand universe, they say, is truly a living organism. It is not a mechanism, but it is a truly living organism, wherein both man and supreme seek to be co-creators of their own perfection, wherein both contribute to the living and evolving deity of power and perfection in the overcontrol of the seven superuniverses. Although the Supreme Being did not create man, mankind evolved to its present state in complete dependence on the potentialities contained within the Supreme. These are all things we've been talking about throughout this course. Our whole life experience occurs within the very essence of the Supreme. Our lives are filled with great challenges because of the incomplete actualization of the Supreme. He is emerging towards perfection, but he is not there yet. God the Supreme has yet to become sovereign within his deity domain. We share his struggles, but as we overcome and triumph, God the Supreme, in like measure, overcomes and triumphs. Again, we're talking about the part and the whole and the relationship that we have between the two of our personality presences. And I'm going to go back to you here, Heather. And this is a nice little statement. Oh, you got to turn your sound on, Heather.
We evolve in him, and he evolves in us. Sometimes in the eternal future, the evolution of the Supreme Deity will become a completed fact of universe history, and the opportunity to participate in this wonderful experience will have passed from the stage of cosmic action.
And this is in reference to the idea they talk about universe age. We're in the first universe age, the deity level of the Supreme. And this is now a time-space reality. The second universe age, when we come to perfection and the Supreme Being emerges, we will end the first universe age because we will have achieved supremacy of perfection. But we will then have a new goal of seeking for the ultimate level and looking for God, the ultimate. You have a comment, Royce?
Not to get off track too much, but just as a quick question, can you scroll that back up to where Heather read about the soul? I
Yes,
just wanted to ask
Sure.
Quick question on that. Go, you're right. Okay, there at the end. No, go back down.
Back down. Okay. Let me get this here.
So that little thing that's inside the box, inside the rectangle.
Okay, there you go.
That one. Okay. It says he also grows as his thought adjuster develops new techniques for reaching down from the spiritual to the Marancha soul. And once the soul comes into being, it begins to grow in and of itself. My understanding was that the soul's growth is dependent on what the human mortal being does and the thought adjuster. It comes into creation because of that, but then its growth is dependent on what the thought adjuster and the human free will creature does. Not that it grows on its own in some way separate and apart from that. Is that correct or no?
No, the growth of the embryonic soul and its growth is very dependent on because we are co-parents with us and the thought adjuster of the soul itself. So we are the begetters of the soul nature, but the soul has a drive within itself to grow on a Marancha level of meanings and values, which will be our new vehicle of Marancha identity on the first dimension world. So this soul is dependent on.
How does it do that on its own? Because that's what it's saying there. It's doing it in and of itself.
Well, the soul consciousness, remember, they say that our guardian seraphim are not guardians of us as individual mortals, but guardians of the soul. The value that we bring, because we may choose not to go on towards ascension. So we may or may not. We are conditional in terms of our future and our destiny. But the idea of the soul has destiny, regardless of whether or not we participate. And I think on that level, the soul has an independence of growth. And in many ways, it is the soul reality that's the focus of all mortal beings, whether or not we choose to, to grow and ascend or not to do so. So the soul has destiny. We don't necessarily have that destiny. So I think when they talk about the soul growing on its own, it's saying basically it is the soul itself that has primary value in terms of the future and the emergence of the supreme being. Does that make any sense to you, Royce?
Okay. Yes. Yes. Like a subdivision, but okay,
Yeah.
I get it. Okay.
No, it's a good
Wondering
question.
how it did that.
Yeah, we
Our
think of the
input.
soul as having dependence on us, but I think in this
Yeah.
case it does have dependence, but it also has independence of its own nature and destiny. Michael Hagan and Heather.
I had the same question as Royce, but then as you begin to answer, I realized that what the reality is, the soul is a real entity within me, and I am fostering the growth of the entity. The adjuster is fostering the growth of that entity, but that entity is in charge of me as much as I allow it to. When I expect of myself that I will submit to my soul as well as my adjuster, I am saying that my soul is the real entity here. My soul that evolved to the point where if I were to die today, the soul would survive. So I already has an adjuster. A cosmic reality of a new being within myself who has been created by myself and the adjuster, but now is functioning on his own and is totally able to control my body, to control my actions, my thoughts, as I allow it to do so.
Michael, they say that we can designate our adjutant mind decisions of our consciousness to our soul consciousness. We can delegate to the soul to take on a greater responsibility to make those decisions and trust the soul in what it's doing. And I think that's a powerful thing to do. And they use that term, delegate to the prerogatives of the soul. It's a very interesting.
I try to do that every night. In fact, now I realize it's not just night, it's daytime too. So I'm constantly saying, soul is in charge. You will submit to the soul. The soul knows what to do. Follow the direction of the soul. And the more I do that, the more it becomes a reality. Day or night.
No, I agree. And in many ways, it's valuable because we in the material form are vehicle of a mortal body, vehicle of identity. If we make soul Morancha decisions through our soul consciousness, that's powerful because now here we are as material mortal beings designating and delegating to the soul the prerogatives of soul thinking. And that is how many people actually do that? We at least we understand what the soul is. And we have, the Urantia book tells us, it speaks an awful lot about the soul consciousness. So we know that it has this ability. And I think our insights in working with the soul and promoting its growth, the fertile ground of the growth of the soul, we provide that growth. We provide the highest adjutant mind of concept that the adjuster now takes and translates it into a Morancha value, which we can't do right now. The adjuster for us can transfer into the fertile ground of the soul, the higher thoughts of Morancha thinking, which we can't do with solely adjutant mind. And that's a very important thing.
I have an affirmation that I make during the day often. We are one.
Yes.
By just are one, potentially. But in reality, we're working toward being one at all times. And often when I make that affirmation, I see differently. My mind, I see differently. The world looks different to me because I'm empowering my soul to take over.
Yeah. No, exactly it. And I think this is something I think this revelation gives to us, because when we understand the inner workings of the spiritual nature of our mind, we can actually use it now for value. I mean, before the Urantia book, it's all confusing to us. We don't know how everything works. But with the insights that we get from the Urantia book, we now have a much better understanding, and it allows us to work with the realities that we deal with of a spiritual and Morantia soul level, that we can actually do things of great value. Heather, and then Lee.
Yeah, in the thought adjuster paper, it says that the soul can become self-conscious,
Yes.
which is fascinating to me. I would love to see you do a thing on soul for us, Stuart, at some point. We could have a really interesting discussion on that.
Well, I did actually, because a few years ago, I did a course with the UUI on the Urantia book's revelation of mind. And we talked about adjective mind, but also soul consciousness. So we spent a good deal of time on that. Hopefully, that could be available, I guess, through the UUI archives. But we spent a good amount of time talking about the revelation of mind from the Urantia book perspective, and I think it's of great value. I mean, as Michael talked about, it to know that we can do these things steers our free will decisions and expressions to make this happen. So that's very good. Lee, I'm going to go to you, brother.
But the idea that comes to me, and it's kind of spoken over and over in the Urantia book, is that as potentials are actualized, new potentials emerge.
Yes.
That's exactly what's going on with the Morantia soul. Not only that, once it's emerged and actualized, it becomes part of your personality, if you will, and it stabilizes you because you've actually actualized some of your potential. Now, the further that you go up the chain, in other words, if you keep actualizing it more and more, I think that stabilizes you even more, and it also is the vehicle, for continued growth down the line in the Morantia spheres and further up but even when we get to the higher levels, as we actualize our potentials, new doors open. And that's what's kind of amazing about the Urantia book, that even when the Supreme gets actualized, another door opens up, and we've actualized the Supreme, but more potentials then open up in the ultimate spheres, and then we can continue onward and outward.
Lee, that's a very important insight that you just shared with us. The idea that as we participate in the growing nature of the perfection of the Supreme Being, he's not perfect now. He is still working on potentials and actualizing them. But the key statement you made there is, as we actualize these new values and these new actualities, that it opens up doors that were not open to us earlier in the emergence of the Supreme Being. So the actual emergence itself, as you just noted very importantly, opens up new doors of insight that we could not have done earlier in the grand universe level at the beginning of time in the ancients of days, onward to the current level that we're at now. So there is a great value there. I think there's a dynamic that as we work with the Supreme and we contribute to this new emergence of perfection, new doors, as you said, and I agree, are opening. New ways of looking at reality and interacting with reality are opening up. And that to me is very, very important. So thank you for that insight. Royce, I'm going to go to you and then we'll get back to the reading.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to concur and say that was a good insight.
Yeah.
And that is basically the underpinning of all fairy tales and much of what Joseph Campbell talks about, that when the hero starts to go on the adventure, Once he makes that decision, now this new hallway opens up that wasn't there before, and all these doors that he can go in and out of and traverse all become real only after you make that decision. But friends come in, helpers, all these other things come to your aid once you make that decision. And those doors aren't even there until you make that decision. Yes, I'm going to go down that road. But that is, yeah, insightful and the underpinning of all fairy tales.
Yeah, and I'm glad, Lee, that you brought it up because it is important. This is the kind of thing that is an insight that we get through your aha moments. As you go there, Lee, and you contribute and share with us this idea that you see of potentials. This is a really good insight you shared with us. So I thank you, brother, for that. So let me get back into where we were. Okay, let me go back up here. I'm going to read this a little bit, and then we'll have another one for you guys to share. The Supreme is beset with overwhelming challenges for attaining self-realization. God the Supreme is finite deity and must therefore work within the imperfections of finite reality. There is the ceaseless struggle for, quote, perfection of status and divinity of being. That's a nice little phrase, isn't it? Perfection of status and divinity of being. The evolutionary souls of Morancha consciousness strive for the attainment of ever-progressing levels of meaning comprehension and value realization. Those are the doors, Lee, you were talking about. As we open these doors, new value realization potentials occur. And it's a driving dynamic that this is happening. And the summation of this collective effort contributes to the emergence of the Supreme Being. Isn't this a great topic? And I'm glad we took the time of all these classes to really dive into what it's saying and what it entails in terms of values. Here we go. I'm going to let next up here for this. And this is for a moment. Heather, you're good. And you turn your side. There you go.
Our struggles with the vicissitudes of time and the evolutions of space are reflections of his efforts to achieve reality of self and completion of sovereignty within the sphere of action which his evolving nature is expanding to the outermost limits of possibility.
Isn't that a beautiful, beautiful statement there? I mean, all of this book is written so well. The engineering of language, they define new terms, but then they put them together in concepts that I think for us almost verge on the idea of two-dimensional Morancha thinking, of Moda kind of thinking that transcends just adjutant mind. I think our soul helps on that level of giving us that cosmic insight that's higher than just straight adjutant mind realization or working on that level. Now, let me go down. So the Supreme Being's very struggle for personal expression in the grand universe, the very evolution of his sovereign divinity is directly dependent upon the free will decisions of every personality in finite existence. The whole of his being is predicated on the totality of their combined actions. The Supreme Being carries on the struggle to achieve actualization of all that is yet to be expressed. But it is only through the realization of choice experience that potentials transmute, I like that word transmute, to actuals in the finite realms of the Supreme, in the grand universe. The growth of the Supreme is dependent upon the decision actions of the finite mind. The Supreme depends upon the integrity of human volition, on man's exercised wisdom of decision actions for his very actuality of experiential evolution. And that's why this section here, the perfection of man and Supreme together, it is a mutual sharing. And I'm going to let you go at this again for this citation. I love this visualization. This is a very important one. Let's take some time on this quote. So Please take it away.
The progressing personality leaves a trail of actualized reality as it passes through the ascending levels of the universes. Be they mind, spirit, or energy, the growing creations of time and space are modified by the progression of personality through their domains. When man acts, the Supreme reacts, and this transaction constitutes the fact of progression.
Isn't that an incredible way of putting it? This is such a key concept. And, that's the gift that we get from this revelation, and why it's so important, I think, to do topical studies on such grand concepts as the emergence of the Supreme Being. When you get something like this statement here, we are progressing personalities. We basically release ripples into time and space through our passing through it. And that is a supreme connection between our efforts to ascend and the supreme efforts to emerge. Let's see, I have Michael Hagan. Your hand is up.
It almost feels like a cosmic body is being created vessel by vessel, muscle by muscle, nerve by nerve, as each act creates a new trail. I imagine an infinite number of people taking trails and walking, and each of the trails that they make doesn't go away. It stays there and connects to other trails, soon becomes a super highway. And so we are actually creating, by our decisions, a universe, body, mind, and a highway system that can be traveled. Until I did whatever it was that I did one day, there was no actuality of that kind of experience for the Supreme. Now there is, because I did something. That thing that I created was also contributed, and in turn contributed to others, so that became a well-known path. And so everyone else says, hey, here's a shortcut I know is really good. Here's a path that will take you to a lot of beauty that you wouldn't see if you missed it. So all of these paths are the sinew of the cosmic body that is the Supreme.
Isn't it great? To me, I was so happy when we started this course, because I knew what we're doing now is expanding our minds and understanding the language of this revelation. Now, when we read a paragraph like this, it's not scary. All the terms make sense. Now we get the full meaning and impact of the concept that they're trying to convey, because we have analyzed each term, and now we understand holistically how important and how this whole thing works together. And for me, it's such a gift and honor to give this kind of course, because I think there is great value. As I put in our beginning notes to the class when we first started, my expectations is this had great value. This is going to change the way we look at reality altogether. But the important thing is, when you now read a paragraph like this a month ago or 2 months ago, if you had read this statement, you'd still be scratching your head a bit. But right now, I think individually, we get a real sense of what they're trying to convey, because we have put the time to understand the meanings and values of their terminology and how they put them all together in concepts that are grand and supreme, just really beautiful. So we got Royce and Lee.
Not to split hairs here, but for me, when this was read, I had conceptually in my head the word absorbs. When you come to when man acts, the Supreme reacts, and this transaction constitutes the fact of progression. I was looking at it not so much as a reaction by the Supreme, but his absorbing that and taking that in. Are they like both happening at the same time, or is there any difference between the use of those words?
Yeah, Royce, I've used the term before, and you've heard it many times from me. The idea of reciprocity. We are not disconnected together. We are the microcosm, and the macrocosm of the realities, and one cannot do without the other. We are in complete unification of effort. But the interesting thing is, when we reach the end of the first universe age and the emergence of the Supreme Being comes into complete perfection, and there's nothing more that can be done on time-space adventure, we will now become part of the Supreme Consciousness. We will become ambassadors of the Supreme. We will go out there with the Master Sons and Mother Spirits to the outer space levels and deal with transcendental beings who do not know what reality is of confined time-space limitation. And we will have to prepare them as ambassadors of the Supreme Being for them to enter into the new nucleus of the grand universe when all of the boundaries of the separate universe disappear and we have a new nucleus of unity of time-space. Yes, Royce?
Right, but everything I did here on your answer that was of worth, of spiritual value, that is now stored in the Supreme forever. That's part of his being,
Forever.
what I contributed to it, and what I did here. That's still a permanent part of him going forward. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. Lee, good brother.
Well, that last sentence really just sums it up, and it's just an amazing understanding of the creator. And that's you don't get this kind of clarity anywhere else, really. When man acts, the Supreme reacts, and this transaction constitutes the fact of progression. Now, what's really amazing here is that when man acts, that's growing your own soul. The Supreme reacts, you're growing the Supreme soul. Okay, and not only that, you're growing the Supreme soul, but that's the only vehicle that allows you to continue on in the second universe age. And that kind of concept is not espoused anywhere that I'm aware of. And this last sentence, which is the capper, and this transaction constitutes the fact of progression. Again, the Supreme being actualized is a foregone conclusion, which means that the framework that the Creator provided is a foregone conclusion. But we are integral. That's a positive thing, right? That's a positive framework. That means that a loving Creator created it perfect, that it will potentially be perfect. It's already perfect in His eyes. However, we're contributing to that perfection, if you will. So that's the way it's created, the framework that's been created for the whole universe. It makes sense from a loving Creator perspective, and it just, the whole interaction that we're reading here, the way that when we make our decisions, we grow a part of the Godhead, that we co-create the Supreme. But the Supreme is already really actualized in the eyes of God. It's just that we have to help do it. The whole thing's amazing, the way it's written here in this one small sentence. It kind of summarizes everything, I think, much of what the Urantia book is trying to teach us.
Isn't it great that we have prepared in all of our studies of these 8 classes, that now this language makes sense to us? Again, we can read these powerful statements that just reverberate in terms of destiny and impact and all the things that we're doing. And these are not scary concepts anymore. These are concepts that enliven us, that make us a participant in this great adventure of time and space. It's so wonderful. And again, that's why this is the 8th final class. But this was the goal that I have been striving to bring us as a group together in terms of this level of shared consciousness. And because I know, to me, I'm selfish. I do this because I am feeding off your increase of consciousness. I feed off you guys because you guys, as you get your insights, I feed off of that as well. And I thank everybody in this class because this was worthy. And as I look back at the 8 weeks that we have spent, it has been well spent. And I tell you, I'm not just giving, it's reciprocity. I gain just as much as any one of us here within this class. So I really love everybody and appreciate what we have done. I got Andre, Vincent, and Michael.
Thank you, Stuart. What I will say is very elementary, Stuart. We just read the Supreme growth by our decision making. So the Supreme cannot grow by himself.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
And if I'm not wrong, Lee, you just say you talk about co-creating.
Yeah.
If I'm not wrong, the Trinity in paradise are a comparison of the thought adjuster for us. So is that co-creation come with the Trinity help the Supreme to grow?
Yeah. Again, what we're talking about here is we have been given the gift of now. For instance, Alpha Omega. The Father knows what the Supreme Being will be in His perfection as a superb mountain, but it has not yet been fully traversed, and that's where we are very important. The aspect of creating the Supreme, how He emerges, is we are also participants in there. The Supreme does not do it on His own. We are working together on this level. And that's why I think something like this paragraph is so important, because it really shows this dynamic of shared. And that's why this is called man's perfection with the Supreme. That's the section of this particular subtopic, because we are so tightly connected in terms of responsibility and impact. So the Supreme Being in perfection is a foregone conclusion. What is not a foregone conclusion is how he achieves that perfection. And that becomes now necessary with us as co-creators and participants in this emergence. Vincent.
Just one moment.
Sure.
Just one moment, Stuart. To take it from our level, the level of finite creature, us also, we cannot grow by ourselves. We are dependent of the spiritual ministry. In that spiritual ministry, our Father, the Supreme, is included. Eh? He helps us to grow.
Yeah. I think, what it is, like I said, this is what it is, it's an adventure. We are given the great gift of co-creating a destiny. And that this co-creation, whatever we contribute to the Supreme individually through our unique personalities and our expressions and our thoughts, this is something that becomes part of the fabric of this new emergence of realities. And I like that idea. When we go into the second universe age, seeking for God, the ultimate, we can be proud of the fact that we together have been part and parcel of this growth and contribution. It's a powerful gift that we have been given to be able to do that. Does that make sense, Andre?
We thank you, Stuart.
All right. Vincent.
Well, I'm going with, okay, Royce, it was something you said. Thank you, look up. You said, the thought is that I'm receiving is that the Supreme only absorbs or recognizes or accepts the goodness that we do. Is there no benefit to the development of the Supreme to know evil in any sense? Does the Supreme, he's just not collecting data, is he not also collecting repentance and what an individual goes through for repentance? Therefore, there seems to me that the Supreme has to know contrast. He has to know good and evil somehow to progress. I mean, if he's just receiving good, 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 and never knowing any of the bad, 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 there seems to be an imbalance there. So I guess I'm wondering, the Supreme is receiving good and bad. And, I still wonder, even from last week's class, when the Supreme reaches the fullness of his creation, the supremacy of his Supreme. And I took it, and you mentioned the word light and life. And, in researching light and life, I mean, it's a planet, and all the planets in every universe, the whole super universe, they have to have one language, one religion, one race, no more sickness, no more wars, no government in a sense. Nobody dies, they are instantly transfused. It seems that, and it's almost an impossibility if for us to think that this planet is going to eventually evolve into one language, one religion, and one race without some cataclysmic assistance. So I'm not saying we give up on we have to take that long range view that we keep hearing about. But if the Supreme is going to reach supremacy, am I right in thinking every super universe with every planet has to reach light and life first?
Yes.
Go for it.
Yeah. And Vincent, you said something very important, because when we look at within our local universe of Nevedon, we think of things like the Lucifer rebellion. Now, there's the darkness against light in contrast, but the idea of the Lucifer rebellion and its adjudication is a contribution to the Supreme Being, because we have gotten past that darkness. Once we have adjudicated the Lucifer rebellion, we will now become inoculated, and no longer we will become immune to that kind of rebellion. We will have resolved it and that is a contribution to supremacy. We have gone through the struggles of that rebellion nature of the Lucifer manifesto, and it will be resolved. And once we resolve it, we will have immunity against any other kind of rebellion like that again. It is an advancement of getting past those struggles and winning and becoming and surviving the struggles and becoming stronger because of it. Does that make sense, Vincent?
What is the process for this earth to become one race, one religion, and one language?
Yeah. We're very far removed from that right now. I would say, in my opinion, in terms of our struggles of going towards light and life, I don't think we're even 25% of the way. In terms of our continued growth, I think we are still an awkward and backward world with many ideas that we have to keep growing through the pains and vicissitudes towards perfection. I think we're not even close to doing that yet. But it is, they tell us, on other worlds that have been around a lot longer than our world of Urantia, that it has been achieved. It is achievable, and it is part of that goal. So we're part of the goal, but I don't think right now we can get a good vision of our someday to be light and life status. I don't think we can even encompass the idea of that.
Then I submit thus paper 51. Okay, I'm on.
All right, thank you, Ben. I got Michael and Janice.
Evil and sin are unreal.
Yeah.
The reality is the reaction to it.
Yep.
When I do something or react to something someone else does, but the goodness that comes out of that is part of the Supreme. The evil itself is soon forgotten. There'll be a day when no one remembers the Lucifer rebellion. It'll just be as though it ever was, because it is important. It's reality only, but the people who react to it use their God nature to make amends, to mend that cracks. But the cracks reinforce the reality. The reality that was dinged by the sin is soon covered over by the goodness that came in reaction to it.
Yeah, I know. I agree with that, Michael. Again, it's part of the growth. Our part, they talk about the vicissitudes of life. The important thing is when we get beset by the vicissitudes and struggles of life, when we survive it, we are no longer vulnerable to that kind of individual suffering. We have risen above it. We have gone past it now to the point. I mean, as teenagers, we would suffer at many things that today, in our maturity of being, that we would never even think about suffering. But in those days, that was part of the growth. You don't grow without challenge and the vicissitudes of life. They are driving factors in our efforts to survive it and then to overcome that vulnerability to that ever again. And I think that's a very positive thing. What do you say to that, Michael? And then Janice.
I totally agree. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Janice.
Okay, so let's look at it from another point of view. There's I don't know, it's the 50s. There's a paper that I read in another class or reading group. And it says that when the Lucifer rebellion is adjudicated, we will, I don't know if it's automatic, but we will, that process will do something to space-time, and we will be where we would have been if it wouldn't have happened. So that's nice to see it from that place.
It's an interesting perspective, isn't it, Janice, to look at it. You know, the idea of struggling is necessary. Remember, they say we fatten on defeat and all those weird statements that they say, but the importance is not to suffer. The importance is to suffer and then overcome the suffering, because now we become immune forevermore afterwards, never to suffer again from that, because we have already risen above it and we have overcome it. And I think in many ways, that's our growth. These ideas that we fatten on defeat. It's not like we want to go through suffering, but when we are suffering, consider the fact that we are going to grow stronger. Like the tree that in the winds bend, but they don't break. You become stronger in the long run. And I think that's the proper perspective. Anytime we're going through suffering and we overcome it, we are no longer vulnerable to that kind of suffering again. We overcome it and we become stronger. Does that make sense, Janice?
Yeah, I like the idea that that will happen. And the adjudications going on, separate from what you were talking about, the adjudications going on, and when it happens, we will be at this point that where it would have not where we would have been if it had not occurred. Agreed. So I thought, well, yeah, there's more. There's just not one thing running through this. This is a huge, and we're not. Everything's not strung out in space and time. We're being helped from out of space and time. And that's not, so my mind's totally open to a miracle. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I always try to put a positive spin on these things. I don't like to suffer. I don't like to have pain. I don't like these things. But when I'm going through, I always have that sense of hope and expectation that I will overcome it. And now I will become immune to any further vulnerability towards that kind of suffering again. And I think that's a positive way of looking at it.
Oh, I like that, because it's like getting a shot for immunity. I mean,
exactly.
Time. Oh boy, that's great. That'll never happen to me again. Good. I like that. Pour that on my
in all of my readings of this book, when I read those sections on suffering and, that we will fatten on defeat and all, I say, wait a minute, I don't like that. But I didn't look at it with the perspective that I now have on it, because we will grow stronger. And I think the Supreme Being also grows stronger and becomes more immune to the kind of Lucifer rebellion that we have gone through and all of the troubles that has caused. Heather, I'm going to go to you, and then Vincent, and then we'll go back to reading.
I love this discussion. Janice, what you were talking about in the course talks about there's two kinds of time. There's horizontal time, and that's how we look at things from our perspective. And then there's vertical time. And vertical time is exactly what you're talking about, as if it never was. And so we get to, we can have that perspective that it's completely done, it's finished, and we learned all the lessons in between. And that helps me too, because when I see things that are disturbing, like Vincent was talking about, what I say to myself is that's because it's incomplete. When it's complete, it's taken care of. So we have an incomplete view, and we won't have a complete view until we're completely finished. And so we have to keep in mind the antipodal viewpoint, the human and the divine, and that right now we're looking from the bottom up. We're looking at the horizontal time. but they're looking at vertical time, and that's just as if it never was and it's over. So that's helpful for me.
I like that, Heather. That's a great way of putting it. Thank you. Vincent, I'm going to go to you, and then let's get back to reading because we have a lot to go.
This is really quick. Yes, Janice, I love what you said. And but that was one default. The other thought is there were two defaults. Where would we be if Adam and Eve didn't do what they did? So we have two defaults to overcome, Janice. But I like your idea though, and I think that all these positive thoughts are just wonderful in this area.
All right. So let me do a little bit of reading here. The act of the creatures. Oh, Royce, you got a comment.
Just one quick one to put like icing on the cake of what was just said. I remember JFK made the pronouncement in regard to the Holocaust. He said it is hard to find the spark of divinity in the ashes of atrocity. And what we're just talking about is that's the view to have. At a human level, you would say that. But when you with the Urantia book, you realize, oh, it's all going to lead to things getting better, and those things will be further and further in our rear view mirror and won't happen again. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you, Royce. And let's continue on because we have a whole other section on predestination and providence to get through today. The act of the creature's choosing to do the will of the Father is of cosmic value and universe meaning. The choice by man to seek the Paradise Father, to seek the adventure of the ascending career, promotes the inevitable destiny of the Supreme in the inexorable flow of time within the stream of eternity. Mortal man has been given, quote, control over the destiny of an infinitesimal fraction of the future of the Supreme. For as man attains human destiny, so does the Supreme achieve destiny on deity levels. That's why we're talking about this joint effort of the macroscopic and the microscopic together. When mortal man has chosen the path of eternal salvation within the eventual fusion and unification with the indwelling adjuster, God and man become one in personality perfection. These divinity unions constitute such an ascending sun, quote, a living part of the Supreme, and ensure for such a one-time mortal being the eternal birthright of the endless pursuit of finality of universe service for and with the Supreme. This language is absolutely powerful stuff. And again, it helps to do this kind of study because now we read it. So I'm going to let you go into this next reading here. And let me go down a bit. We'll get it centered.
When a human being chooses eternal survival, he is co-creating destiny. And in the life of this ascending mortal, the finite God finds an increased measure of personality, self-realization, and an enlargement of experiential sovereignty.
These all make sense to it. When we read these now, the concept, we don't have to struggle. We get it. We get the idea. And that's why I love this revelation. It is so cohesive and coherent in its expression that it is very powerful. When we finally choose the Father's will in accordance with the purposes and plans that he has laid out in the deity realm of the Supreme, we exalt our free will personality to the highest level of choice, and we contribute immeasurably to the growth of the Supreme. It is, quote, by such union with divinity, man exalts, enriches, spiritualizes, and unifies his evolving self to the very threshold of supremacy. Again, this language is superb and unrivaled by any other language I've ever come across. By giving our all to the Father, we also dedicate everything to the actualization of the Supreme. In return, we receive the unimaginable blessing of the Father's eternal presence, and we help bring to fruition the destiny of the Supreme. And here's another citation for you to go after here.
But no God knowing mortal can ever be lonely in his journey through the cosmos, for he knows that the Father walks beside him each step of the way, while the very way that he is traversing is the presence of the Supreme.
Aren't these incredible statements? This is like poetry of concept, the spiritual concept. And again, that's why I thank everybody here for your contribution in this course. From paradise, our thought adjusters bring with them to those mortal candidates for indwelling predetermined plans for their intellectual and spiritual development. The plans for these model careers have been lovingly and considerately determined and foreordained by themselves and the personalized adjusters of Divinington. And these offered programs, we don't have to accept them, for attaining the ideal life have been duly certified by the attached personalized adjuster to your entry. However, mortal beings are not enforced to adopt these plans. We have free will. If a mortal creature chooses to reject his eternal career, to basically not go on with ascension, the Supreme is inevitably delayed, accorded by the loss of this creature's experiential contribution to the evolution of this finite God of supremacy. This experiential deprivation must eventually be compensated by substitutional or collateral experience by another mortal being that we will no longer be participants in. The Supreme must await the action of another creature at some future time who will present an equivalent contribution to the Supreme. And that's why we are so important in our co-creation. Now, here's a nice little statement for you to go.
But if a creature rejects the eternal career, that part of the Supreme, which was dependent on this creature's choice, experiences inescapable delay, a deprivation which must be compensated by substitutional or collateral experience. As for the personality of the non-survivor, it is absorbed into the oversoul of creation, becoming a part of the deity of the Supreme.
Michael Hagan, you got a comment.
It occurred to me what this is saying is that each of us has a purpose for being. That the Father has said, you, Michael, you, Stuart, here's something that I need you to do. You're the best one for the job because you got a unique set of experiences, insights, and a mind and people to work with. You are the ideal one for the job. I need you to do this. If I do it, I help the Supreme. If I don't, God says, well, there'll be another one. He'll come along.
Yeah, that's really it. You know, again, this is encouragement. And for me, I can't ever envision why anybody would choose not to ascend. The Father, in his love, has put before us, out of love, this great adventure and revealment of himself on all of his personality levels, that we can have that forever, and that we will have a continuing flow of his love that we can never drain or empty. It will be for eternity, that we will always be in a continuing growth of insight and participation on this level. So let me go down. So man's personality comes from the Father and is therefore eternal. It will eventually achieve deity destiny. Man's personality with regard to self-identity is a conditioned eternal reality, and man must choose to be individually present at the attainment of such destiny. And here's two different citations here.
The great challenge that has been given to mortal man is this: will you decide to personalize the experiential value meanings of the cosmos into your own evolving selfhood? Or by rejecting survival, will you allow these secrets of supremacy to lie dormant, awaiting the action of another creature at some other time, who will in his way attempt a creature contribution to the evolution of the finite God? But that will be his contribution to the Supreme, not yours. And so the decision awaits each of you, as it has once awaited each of us. Will you fail the God of time, who is so dependent upon the decisions of the finite mind? Will you fail the supreme personality of the universes by the slothfulness of animalistic retrogression? Will you fail the great brother of all creatures, who is so dependent on each creature? Can you allow yourself to pass into the realm of the unrealized when before you lies the enchanting vista of the universe career, the divine discovery of the Paradise Father, and the divine participation in the search for and the evolution of God the Supremacy?
And these entreaties are so important. I love it when they step out of the narrative and they talk to us individually. This touches our heart and our soul of our being. And here's the last one. You could just put that last little bit there.
The cycle is foreordained, but man's participation therein is optional, personal, and experiential.
So all of these three citations together, that's why I put it in one graphic. They all fit together to truly show the scope of this opportunity and adventure.
But Stuart, it reminds me of the thought adjuster's plea. You know, it's so personal. You know, he's pleading with us to please do your part in helping the Supreme come into actualization.
Absolutely. And you know, that's why, isn't it great that we reached this 8 class? Because now it all comes together. I think what I'm trying to do here is put a final statement on this topical investigation. And I think it worked well. I think I put the classes together in the right order. And this is the way where I wanted to end up, to give you guys a sense of why we put in these 8 classes and where are we now in terms of understanding this. Michael.
This is all giving me an incredible surge of understanding. Predestination is not absolute. I am not following a script that God made, but God knows the world I'm born into. He knows my potential. He knows where I'm going to be, what I'm going to do, roughly. He knows if I do certain things, that will fulfill a need that no one else will fulfill. Not now, maybe not now, but eventually they can. But here it is. It's laid out for you. It is my destiny to follow God's will and to do the things He needs done. Just not my predestination, but my destiny. All of us.
Yeah, and it is a true adventure, and we are truly co-creators with the Father and the Supreme in making this happen. That's why it's so important. When you get that sense of what we do, we are not ants in an anthill that are meaningless on a super universe level of scope. We are critically important, and we have this great gift to do this. So let me go into here. This is our last part of the class, but I want to get into some of these concepts. The power, mind, spirit, personality actualization of the Supreme is considered an evolutionary inevitability. It will emerge. From an eternity perspective, the someday to be completed evolution of the Supreme Being is a foregone conclusion. The exact pathway by which he evolves, however, is not determined. Throughout the time-space constrained deity level of supremacy, the Universal Father establishes for all personalized types of intelligent will creatures the profound freedom of free will expression. This gift of personalized free will strives co-creatively with the Father for the destined actualization of the Supreme Being. Much like the biblical miracle of God separating the waters, of infinity, thus allowing Moses and the chosen people to safely pass. God has, by his own inviolable act of infinite and absolute free will, separated the all-encompassing waters of infinity and provided a safe haven for his beloved and free-willed children. This safe haven is nestled deeply within the nurturing bosom of the Supreme. It is within the inherent nature of the Universal Father to freely give of himself to his creation. He chooses to do this. He delegates, quote, every power and all authority that could be delegated. If he can delegate it, he does so, and bestows, quote, all of himself and all of his attributes, everything he possibly could divest himself of in every way, in every age, in every place, and to every person and in every universe. This language, again, is like Shakespeare. You don't get higher expression language than this. This investment of free will and self-expression is given to all personal beings dependent on the Father for their existence. And this implies a self-imposed limitation of deity that reflects, quote, the outworking of the ideal and infinite love of the universal Father. This is the wonderful gift. We now get a real sense of that, don't we? Okay, here's another citation.
The Father is infinite and eternal, but to deny the possibility of his volitional self-limitation amounts to a denial of his very concept of his volitional absoluteness.
That's a good quote, isn't it? That one is foundational to what I'm trying to get across here in terms of his love of giving and the fact that he does self-limit. Royce, please. Turn your sound on. There you go.
That self-limitation is there for a good reason. And I put it simply in human terms. Nobody who receives a gift on Christmas or for their birthday, that gift is not a gift if it was demanded, coerced, or forced. The gift is enjoyable because of what it is, but it's also enjoyable and a gift because it was given freely, voluntarily. And that's what God has done for us. He gives us that choice.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Royce. And again, I've been talking, you've heard me in our other types of groups that we get together with this idea of providence and predestination and my views on it, but it's, I think, completely supported by what the revelators tell us. Michael and Heather.
This gets directly into the whole idea of why does God allow suffering? He allows suffering because he knows that there's a mortal who can solve that problem. He won't solve it if a mortal can solve it. It's up to us to understand.
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, it's hard for us sometimes to understand, especially for people who are struggling so much in this world. And, this is a world of suffering. And for some of us, we are overwhelmed by the suffering to the point where we just can't be spiritually healthy, where we are really damaged on certain levels. And I don't have a full understanding of that, except that the Father is the great healer. I trust. I have faith in the Father. But there are three times they use in this revelation the term faith dash trust. You can have faith in the Father, but I also trust in his goodness. And that what I see in suffering in things that I can't comprehend and that tear me apart is because of my mortal linear level of time-space understanding, and I can't see the bigger picture. And I do have, regardless of things, I believe anything that's ever been good is never lost in the good hands of our Father. And that term, faith dash trust, is something that really defines my understanding. I don't understand the suffering of the innocent. I do not understand, and it still pains me, but I trust. And that what I do not understand now, I believe I will be satisfied with in the long term. And I think that comes down to the idea of trust, that nothing ever good is ever lost. Sometimes we see things that we think are lost forever. A beautiful innocent child, something happens to them and they're off they're out of the picture altogether. And that destroys me to see that kind of innocence and beauty gone. But I think in my trust, that is not lost. And I think in the Father's eternal and infinite love, those are all very important. Let's continue on. We're getting close to some of the key ideas. In the most comprehensive sense, total infinity encompasses the capability of self-limitation, and this qualification includes the volitional self-limitation of the Father I am, that, quote, is susceptible of reality expression to all levels of universe existence. This infinite potential of the I am self-qualified is self-expressed and self-revealed in the threefold deity unification of the Trinity. The technique of trinitization allows the Father to divest himself of all direct manifestation of absoluteness except absolute fatherhood and absolute volition. That he maintains because he is personal. On the deity level of supremacy, where the supreme being is personalizing in time and space, we find the, quote, maximum self-limitation of the Trinity is its attitude towards the finite. This is quite an adventure that we are in. In certain aspects, and in accordance with the established mandates of the Father's purpose and plan, the choice actions precipitated by the human mind are, for the most part, unpredictable. We are far more than isolated material beings bound by unbreakable chains of tyrannical river of time. There is no script that is written out. The script is not written. We are not inexorably circumscribed to a personal fate that is inflexibly fixed from all eternity. And that's my attitude towards this idea of predestination. I think in terms of providence, that's real. The providence is a flow towards the purpose and plan of the Father. But in terms of predestination, it is not determined. And that's where we have true free will and contribution capabilities. Here's another key quote. It's a long one, but I'll give it to you there, Heather.
Having thus provided for the growth of the immortal soul and having liberated man's inner self from the fetters of absolute dependence on antecedent causation, the Father stands aside. Now man, having thus been liberated from the fetters of causation response, at least as pertains to eternal destiny, and provision having been made for the growth of the immortal self, the soul, it remains for man himself to will the creation or to inhibit the creation of the surviving and eternal self, which is for him, is his for the choosing. No other being, force, creator, or agency in all the wide universe of universes can interfere to any degree with the absolute sovereignty of the mortal free will, as it operates within the realms of choice, regarding the eternal destiny of the personality of the choosing mortal. As pertains to eternal survival, God has decreed the sovereignty of the material and mortal will, and that decree is absolute.
So those people who fall back on this idea of predestination as a script that's already been written, God already knows what we're going to decide, this one goes counter to it. The self-limitation, the Father has truly created us as his beloved children, daughters and sons. True free will, co-creative prerogatives in bringing about destiny. And he does that. He stands aside, where it says that one little statement, the Father stands aside. In its widest reaching of cosmic implications, celestial providence is the deliberate and certain emergence of the light and life sovereignty of the Supreme Being within the universes of time and space. From the Paradise Father's point of view from eternity, the emergent Supreme Being is a foregone conclusion. The Supreme Being is the destiny of original purpose, implicit within the Father's far-reaching plans for his time-space creations. The contributory details of outworking for this providential destiny, however, remains original and unpredictable. I mean, I still do with people who say God knows everything. How could he not know? He chooses not to. And these statements by the revelators strongly support this idea that we are truly beloved children. Here's another citation for you to get into.
Providence does not mean that God has decided all things for us and in advance. God loves us too much to do that, for that would be nothing short of cosmic tyranny. Man does have relative powers of choice.
When they say relative here, we are confined only in one area. We live within the confines of supreme reality of time and space. We can't do anything but progress on the linear progression of time, and we cannot be everywhere in terms of our presence in the creation. We are limited on those levels of power. We can't choose to go beyond there because that is not within our capabilities as mortal beings. Now, the someday, this is a great one. I have fashioned this statement for a long time, and this is the way I want to now state it. This is my final view on the emerged Supreme Being. The someday sovereignty of the Supreme Being in many ways resembles the majesty of a magnificent mountain. There are many unique pathways for reaching the top of a mountain. The final achievement of this effort remains the same regardless of the method of approach. The numerous potential pathways that establish a mountain's circumference and lead to the same summit are characterized by nearly unlimited originality and spontaneity. But there comes a time when no further choice of pathway to the top covers new and untouched topology. Every step of that mountain now has experienced. And this is when the mountain in its essential topology has been completely traversed and made fully experienced. The mountain may still, at this point, be scaled with original pathways. But the difference here is, but no new ground will be uncovered. In other words, there will still be ascendancy paths for finite beings to go to paradise. But there'll be nothing here of new ground being uncovered. After the final emergence of the Supreme Being, life experience in the finite creations of time and space will continue. But there will be nothing further contributed that is fully unique and one of a kind. It is this final nature of the Supreme Being that is subject to the predestined destiny of the Father's creative plans. The majestic mountain of the Supreme will be eventuated, and that is a transcendent time level or eventuation. It doesn't evolve, it is eventuated in its full glory, and a new phase of purpose and plan will begin to unfold. The new second universe age of seeking now for God, the ultimate. Here's a nice citation.
Providence is a sure and certain march of the galaxies of space and the personalities of time toward the goals of eternity, first in the Supreme, then in the ultimate, and perhaps in the absolute. And in infinity, we believe there is the same providence, and this is the will, the actions, the purpose of the Paradise Trinity, thus motivating the cosmic panorama of universes upon universes.
Aren't these statements incredible? These are the ones, I'm glad we have a handout, because these are the ones you want to keep reinforcing in your own cosmic perspective of things, because it is so well presented by the revelatories. The freedom from the shackles of absolute predestination may be primarily due to the Universal Father's eternity decision to lovingly provide for a creation where creature free will is of tantamount sanctity. It is certainly a possible repercussion of the incomplete evolutionary status of the Supreme Being. There appears to be a providential unity in the evolving universes of time and space that is providing a basis of purpose continuity to the whole fabric of cosmic events. There is a driving cosmic flow of time and events that draws all things and beings into its powerful and swirling white waters and eddies. There is a powerful indication that all experiences, lives, ages, and epochs that successfully occur in the cosmos are demonstrating and accounting for and correlation with, quote, the transactions of time with the underlying purposes and basic reactions of eternity. This language just flows. I can read this book over and over for another few lifetimes if I had the opportunity. Okay, here's another one for you.
As regards an individual life, the duration of a realm, or the chronology of any connected series of events, it would seem that we are dealing with an isolated stretch of time. Everything seems to have a beginning and an end. And it would appear that a series of such experiences, lives, ages, or epochs, when successively arranged, constitute a straightway drive, an isolated event of time flashing momentarily across the infinite face of eternity. But when we look at this from behind the scenes, a more comprehensive view and a more complete understanding suggest that such an explanation is inadequate, disconnected, and wholly unsuited properly to account for and otherwise to correlate the transactions of time with the underlying purposes and basic reactions of eternity.
This language is just, it goes beyond my mind. Again, this is why we love this revelation. The evolving supreme being appears to have, now this is a last concept we're going to get into. The evolving supreme being appears to have some ability to forecast and to a limited extent anticipate future evolutionary trends in his cosmos. This is what they tell us. This process is referred to as the, quote, imminence of the projected incomplete. It's an interesting term and worthy of considering and thinking about. And it is conjectured to originate from the Supreme's someday destiny to interact with and participate on the level of the superfinite reality of the absolute, the ultimate level of transcendent time and space. This predictive ability of the Supreme, quote, appears to be an amazingly fortuitous coordination of apparently unsettled universe happenings. This must be the function of providence, the realm of the Supreme Being and the conjoint actor. And I'm going to let you have this. This is pretty close to the end. Turn your sound on, Heather.
Sorry. It may be that on the upper limits of the finite, where time conjoins transcendent time, there is some sort of blurring and blending of sequence. It may be that the Supreme is able to forecast his universe presence onto these super time levels, and then to a limited degree anticipate future evolution by reflecting this future forecast back to the created levels as the imminence of the projected incomplete.
Oh, now this is a concept that it goes as far as, it's an amazing concept, this idea. And, this is the revelators. They don't have the answer. They're conjecturing. This is what they seem to do, and this is their theory of why this may happen the way it does. They're giving us what they understand, which they don't fully understand, which is a very interesting thing. I love this revelation for that. Now, they say that man himself develops a growing ability over time to become supremely foresighted regarding both his own future, along with the evolving trends of the universe itself and its relentless march towards perfection. And I think we got another citation coming up that will reflect that. Here we go. So there it is. Yes, and you have a comment, Heather.
That's okay. I'll pass. There is a providence in the evolutionary universes, and it can be discovered by creatures to just the extent that they have attained capacity to perceive the purpose of the evolving universes.
There's a thought. Doesn't that get you thinking, doesn't it? It's any comments on that? Because we're going to finish off, I think, now here. Actually, let me finish it off because we're coming towards the end of the class. The cosmic providence of the Supreme, though, deals strictly with the totality of the cosmos. The lone individuals only become involved in this providential impact if their functional involvement has importance to some higher total, be it the total race, nation, planet, or higher still. Consider, this is my consideration, consider the sublime power and beauty of the Father's purpose and plan for us. We do have a very real choice in our own destiny. Our individual futures are not foreordained. From eternity, the Father could have conceivably seen the end from the beginning and of the Supreme Being in full power and glory. But by the greatest miracle of all, the Father allows us the incredible opportunity to become very real and critically important co-creators of destiny. Not so much as to the determination of the final nature of the Supreme Being, but rather in how this final nature emerges. In liaison with God, all things are possible, and this powerful union of God and man, creature-creator, sets the stage for, quote, the finite drama of the time-space adventure of the infinite. Creation is God's supreme adventure in time and space, and this great venture is unique, unpredictable, and totally original. And here's my last statement. Consider the awesome God-given power that is at this very moment for each of us in our own hands. Right now, this very second, we can do this now, this very second as a group, each of us individually. Right now, this very second, You have within your power as a personal choosing the ability to consecrate yourself to the doing of the Father's will. You can choose to align your will to his purposes, to participate in the carrying out of his divine plans, and to share in the glorious destiny of the perfecting Supreme. The only power in all the universe of universes that can prevent you from doing this is yourself. Your own limitations define what you can and cannot do. I want to stop sharing here. Now, that was a lot. I didn't want to rush through things, but I knew today we had an awful lot to go over. I'm going to ask in this last couple of minutes here, any comments on the course or on today's study or anything in general? Any comments from anybody? Feel free to come on and just, here you go, Michael.
This is a magnificent piece of work. I can see the thinking of decades and the understanding in depth of this book and this experience. Thank you so much for it. I can only wait to go back and take it apart sentence by sentence for a long time. Thank you.
Well, no, thank you guys. Again, I say this is a group effort. We come together as a community of soul consciousness, and we share our individually together. We are not monks living within a cave. We grow in our consciousness by coming together as a community of souls. And in the name, they say where two or more are gathered in Jesus' name, he is there in reality among us as he is now among us today. Elite.
Well, Stuart, thanks for putting this together. I mean, I can see how much effort you put into it. It's a lifetime of effort that you put into this document. And, we're reaping some of the rewards of that. And thanks for just, putting it all together for us and for the community at large. I think the way you put it together was really meaningful. Even though I've been reading a long time, you do get new insights every time. It's not the easiest of topics to digest. Even after 8 classes, I think we did our best to mull it over. But, I guess, like you said, try maybe studying it a little more in depth on with more classes and more time frame. That might be helpful. If you could get that going, that I'd be interested in that too, because I think for me the Supreme has always been a real revelation that you don't find anywhere else anywhere. And it to me, I always have this analytical mind that needs to understand. I'm kind of like you, an engineer. I need to understand it at the highest levels, and I try to in every which way. And these kind of studies are very helpful.
Yeah, and I hope that I would like to do all the suggested readings itself, to go and actually do that as a study group. That could take some time. There's more here to chew on this phone. There's still meat there to have, and to actually go into the actual revelatory statements. Right here, you're getting me paraphrasing the book on this topic. But if we actually go right into the book and read all the references that I have put out, I think there's great value. So I hope we can get that going. Heather, and then Vincent.
Yeah, I agree. I'm so grateful for you putting this together. I'm just really realizing, Stuart, that in a real way, we just experienced what we just read, that when man acts, the Supreme reacts. So when you acted by putting this together, the part of us, we all reacting to what you've done, and the Supreme is, getting parts of that. So you just demonstrated so beautifully what we've just been reading, and thank you for that.
Thank you, Heather. I love it. I mean, I get so much adrenaline for these classes because I love this book, and I love the topic of the emergence of the Supreme Being. It is so important. Those people say it's beyond my capability to understand. No, there's value to understand it. This is reality as we're working with God and trying to work in a way that we can meaningfully contribute. So that's why these are important. Vincent, you may have the last word.
Well, I want to promote your book. You wrote a great book on the Supreme. I have it. I got to read it again and again. And you put together paragraphs and thoughts on the lesson are just great, and they were coordinated. But the diagrams you put together that you created, and the scenery that you put some of the words in, I don't know how you do it, Stuart. I'm of that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, you know, it's just love. I love this revelation, and I love the language of it. I love the concepts of it. It has changed my life, and I love to share with everybody here. I like to share in these classes because there is so much in this book worthy of our investigation. But to do it as a group is a gift. So I thank you all. You guys are incredible, and you know, it'd be nice to get all of these videos of all 8 classes and, you know, get them in order, because I think they are worthy of watching again. You know, because we went through it one time, but we did it fresh. Now to go back and review it all, there's value now because we can reinforce the ideas and the insights into our being. So I love you all. You guys are incredible. Thank you, God, for this gift of us coming together and everything we're doing. So I'll be thanking God for the rest of the day.
With love.
Thank you, Stuart. Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right,
you,
guys.
everyone.